welcome back to another episode of the Divorce and Separation Coach podcast. This week we're talking about a theme that unfortunately comes up a lot. When you see parents divorcing or already divorced, where one of the two is really trying to support their child or their children when the other one really isn't helping and sometimes lacks a bit of emotional intelligence with regards to the way they engage with the children and potentially putting them in the middle of it. So to talk about this topic, I've invited Hannah Strong. And Hannah is a coach, a therapist, and herself a separated mother of two who specializes in helping parents to support their children in the best way possible through divorce and also throughout their childhood of growing up with separated parents. She works with parents through her own framework that's not only based on the science of child brain development and her own psychological knowledge as a therapist, but also her own lived experience. Hannah, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
I'm really looking forward to this talk because there's so many people who have this challenge. A lot of times people say, I'm trying so hard, and then my ex is just destroying it all. And it feels really difficult. So from your experience, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see children face when one of the parents is not co-parenting effectively?
Yeah, this is sadly so common, and it's so scary as the parent who's deeply invested in the child and their well-being, seeing this huge part of your child's life being completely outside of your control. Yeah. And you desperately want to control everything and make sure your child's going to be okay. But it can feel like, if you're co-parenting 50% of the time or even less, that huge chunk is outside of your control. And the amount of anxiety that sits there, especially when you can see it affecting your child and not knowing how to speak to them about it and how to support them in it and how to come at it in a way that's free of blame and shame from the other parent, because we don't want our child feeling bad about what is essentially 50% them, but we also want them to see where the boundaries are and what's okay and what's not okay. And it can feel like just such a overwhelming and kind of hopeless situation, actually, because there is no control over that other person.
Yeah, and also I think in a lot of cases, it just feels like the other person is just destroying all the good work you're doing. So, as the parent who's trying so hard, and the temptation is to then level down to their level and to start playing that game of tit for tat and rectifying things, which is really, it might give you that internal satisfaction immediately in that moment. For the child, it's even worse. Now you've got two parents who are saying bad things.
Yeah, totally. I think the research from all of this shows that children need one key attachment figure to be a secure base for them to turn out well-rounded and be secure in themselves. So
that's very reassuring for people. So, it's okay if the other one is messing it up. If you're stable and you're there for your child, that's going to be enough.
Absolutely. So I think what I see time and time again is the parent who is invested in the child's well-being, desperately trying to control everything and trying to make the co-parent see and trying to make them understand. And maybe if I say it like this, then they'll understand. Or maybe if I say it like that, or maybe if I approach it with my child like this, continuously focusing on all of this stuff that is essentially outside of their control. But if we look, okay, what is in our control? It's our thoughts, our feelings, our actions, literally only those three things, which can feel scary. But once you accept that, it can also feel quite freeing, because actually I'm going to let go of all that stuff that I can't control, and I'm going to focus on how I help my child to process the stuff that is happening with their other parent, how I'm going to help them understand what is okay, what is not okay, how I'm going to help them understand why the other parent is doing that in a way that's free of blame and free of shame. And in doing that, that is how you are a secure base for your child. So the work is really working out how you become the secure base, rather than trying to invest all of your energy in your co-parent becoming more secure, because a lot of the times it's not
can't do anything about it. Yeah, and I do see clients who are desperately trying to re-educate their ex and to make them into another person. And I often say, if you couldn't change them when you were married, they're less likely now even to try and change. And in a lot of cases, the other parent doesn't think there's a problem. They think that what they're doing is fine and perfectly, aligned to what the child needs. So you're right. Even during divorce, it's often something I tell people is, forget about the other person. You can't control their behavior, but you can control what you do. And it's really nice to hear that actually that's all it takes is one parent who is stable and safe for the child to thrive.
Yeah, one parent. You can be that one parent. Just invest all of your energy into that. But also, I really recognize the weight that comes with being that one secure parent and how it feels like when your child is with you, you have to get it right all of the time because they've got a percentage of their time where they're with a parent who isn't secure or isn't treating them in the best way. So then they come back to you and maybe your child is having some really big feelings because they haven't been able to let them out in their other home. So you're trying to deal with all of that, and then you get them regulated, and then it feels like you're carrying everything when it comes to your child's mental and emotional well-being, and potentially even practical well-being as well. And that can feel incredibly overwhelming because it's like it's all on you to get right. But if we look at another piece of research, it shows that we need to get it right 30% of the time for
that feels good to hear.
30% of the time for our child to be secure. So it's not you have to get it right and be this perfect parent, this secure parent 100% of the time, 30% of the time. So that means 7 of your interactions out of 10 can go wrong and your child will still be okay.
You can have those days where you're in a bad mood or you're stressed out and it's all right. And you haven't messed it all up.
Totally, because we're not robots, we're humans, and we will get it wrong.
Yeah, and in a lot of cases, people are themselves going through their own turmoil. So, you're a parent, yes, but you might be going through, heartbreak or grief or whatever it is you're feeling in that moment. And so you're not at your best to be trying to support your child or your children.
Yeah, totally. It's like trying to, in many ways, reparent yourself whilst parenting your child and looking at all of the I guess stuff from your childhood and your unmet needs, which cause you to be in a marriage where potentially those needs are unmet too, and how you heal yourself from all that whilst holding your child through it. It's a lot.
It is a lot. So in practice, what kind of, I guess, little habits or strategies that can people put in place if you're the parent who's trying to be that solid base for your child? What can you do in practice?
There's lots you can do, and I think there's a masterclass you're going to link to which people can watch, and there's going to be a ton more information in there. But I think one of the key things is that children are constantly trying to understand and make sense of the world, make sense of themselves, make sense of other people and their relationship with other people. And so we want to help our children to make sense of this stuff. So if you are having an off day and you're not feeling at your best, and that's okay, but we want our child to understand why that's happening rather than then connecting the dots in a way that means they're the problem. And unfortunately, due to the way human brains are wired, that is the conclusion children will come to. Even if we tell them until we're blue in the face, that is what they come to, because essentially it's all to do with attachment. And our children need to feel securely attached to us as their caregiver in order for them to feel like they're going to survive. It's a survival need, because if we take it back to the cave, if we weren't securely attached to a caregiver and we're an infant or a child and the caregiver, then we die. Exactly, and that brain wiring is still there. And so if our child feels like, oh, mum's not okay or dad's not okay, why are they not okay, they will try and pin the dots back to them and how they can change and how they can mold in order to make it better, because that's actually a safer feeling for them. If they believe that they're the problem, well, that's okay, because I've got control over me and I can mold and I can change. Whereas if they're the problem or they're going through something and I don't understand what it is, then that's danger, because then it's outside your control. So they will pin it back to them. So us being super open about, I really like the cup of tolerance analogy. So, oh, my cup is feeling pretty full and it's overflowing. I've got big feelings, but it's full from I've had a busy day at work and this happened and that happened and this happened. Not, it's all age appropriate stuff that we're explaining to our children, but just explaining to them my cup is full because of things going on in life, not because you didn't want to eat your dinner and you're that's the bit that's on the top that maybe they've seen everything come out because of that, but actually them just understanding there's so much more to it, and it's not them.
Yeah. It's a bit like when you tell children about your divorce. In a lot of cases, they will think it's their fault or they've done something. And, it may be something like, oh, if I hadn't thrown that tantrum yesterday, you wouldn't be divorcing, that kind of thing. Yeah. So there is that temptation to bring it back to themselves. I can completely relate to that. So how do you deal with when you've got one spouse who is trying to do the right thing and the other is, for example, making bad, nasty comments about the other parent, bad-mouthing them in front of the children in a way that makes them feel, like they've got split loyalties? How would the parent who's trying to do it right actually react to that and support the child through that?
So when that happens, the child is left with so many conflicting feelings. And what we're tempted to do as the parent on the other end of it is to come back defensively and say, well, that's not true because of this, and look at this, and look at this, and look at this, and provide our children with evidence as to why that's not true, which is natural and it's normal. And that there is a place for that. But before we get to that stage, we have to hold space for our children to feel those conflicting feelings and to wonder, well, why did mum or dad say that about you? And what is true in this? And just to hold space. So that means basically you just listen to them and you empathize. Oh, that must have felt really hard when they said that I'm not very nice to them. Oh, how did that make you feel? And this can feel scary for us to do because we think, no, I don't want to kind of add fuel to the fire. I don't want them to go further down that rabbit hole. But actually providing space for them shows them that you are safe. It shows them that you are that secure base and they can come to you with any thoughts or feelings, whether those thoughts and feelings are for you or against you, and you can hold space for them. And children will be shown your character through the way that you behave with them.
Yeah. And the fact that you're not dismissing any of their feelings or correcting them is very important in that as well. And how would you address it with the other parent? Back to your point earlier that you can't control them. Do you just let it go and focus on your child, or do you still try and address it?
Yeah, there's a balance. So, and it really depends who you're dealing with. So if you are dealing with someone who is maybe more narcissistic and is just simply not going to listen, you can say it until you're blue in the face and they won't listen, and they might take a bit of pleasure out of not listening and actually seeing that they're getting into it again. So actually continuing to ask is just draining your energy over towards them rather than investing it in holding your child where they're at and you healing yourself from those comments that probably make you feel anxious and upset and overwhelmed and insecure slightly in your attachment to your child because it feels like that's being challenged by someone from the outside. So I think it's always worth putting the boundary in place and saying, this is not okay. This is why I feel it's not okay. And using I statements, I feel. And if it's not received, there's really nothing more you can do with that. The thing you can do is when your child is with you, hold space for them to process those feelings, process that experience. And once they've processed that, then start to talk about how what they said isn't true because of this, because of this, because of this. So we do get to the part where we do actually say things that are in our defense, but it's not what we immediately come back with.
Yeah. And there's ways of rectifying facts that aren't saying, your mom or your dad is wrong. You can say, well, sometimes people feel that way. You can say it in more generic terms, so it doesn't feel like you're entering into that, tit for tat kind of approach, and the child doesn't feel again that sense of having two different narratives.
Yeah.
I like the idea. So it's not, so diving into the facts is actually the initial temptation, but it's something that should be set aside for a bit later. The first focus is the child and their feelings and allowing them to feel the way they feel, really.
Yeah, even if it's mad at you for something that haven't really done. But I've
had clients where the child comes back repeating what the other parent says. You're always late. Even sometimes just you're always late, or just negative comments that have come up at the other parent's house, and they're probably just kind of testing to see whether it's true or not, and the other parent's going to react. That can be really difficult as well.
Yeah, totally. So if we take the "you're always late" comment, a way we would kind of sit with our child in that is repeat it back. Oh, you feel like I'm always late. How does it make you feel when I'm late? Oh, you felt like that. Oh, okay. Yeah, I can see why you feel like that. So you're just providing that secure base. You're just being someone who's not reacting, who's not defending. And you might know that it's come from the other parent, but you're providing space for them to think, well, how do I actually feel about it?
Yeah.
And how maybe they might then start to talk, open up. If you provide space for your child to be open with you, they will then open up about what's going on with the dynamic with their other parent. And they want you to be able to hold space for them there without you feeling really irritated and saying, well, they shouldn't be saying that to you. Well, that's their stuff.
Ultimately what they need, right, is they need to know that they can share that with you. I'm assuming that I know there are times where the child will actually be quite confused or frustrated even with what the other parent has said, and relay that back saying, I don't know what to say because mom or dad keeps saying that you're not nice, but I know you're nice, or whatever it is they're saying. And so how do you address that when the child does feel the confusion that comes from all of this?
I'd lean into how they feel at the time. So when they say that I'm not nice, what do you feel like? And they'll probably say something very surface level like sad, and then, oh yeah. So just leaning with curiosity, just thinking, I'm not going to speak unless I'm being curious about their experience.
Yeah.
Oh, why does it make you feel sad? Oh, because I feel like you're good. Okay, what makes you feel like I'm good? What makes you feel like you, I don't know, want to say something different? What makes you feel like you can't say anything different? What do you feel like would happen if you did say something different?
Yeah.
So helping them to unpick the dynamic that's going on between them and their other parent without you being explicit and telling them. They've got to process it and come to that place themselves where actually they realize, okay, it's making me feel not okay because actually I know you are safe, I know you are good, I know you're kind, but I feel like I can't say anything because my other parent can't hold that, and actually they need to believe that you're not kind, so I have to just not say anything. So actually that makes me feel unsafe and a bit scared when I'm there. And then once your child's opened up kind of that far, you can then hold them in the feelings of them feeling unsafe and what they can do to keep themselves safe when they are feeling those things, and what they can do to look after themselves, and what they can do to not take on the other parent stuff and try and bend and mold and make the other parent okay. So it's almost like this really long journey, but it absolutely starts from us as their secure parent providing that secure base for them where they can come and discuss anything.
There's an element of teaching them how to set boundaries as well with the other parent, and without coaching them, I guess, into behavior that's not natural. But if they're feeling very bothered by those comments, I would imagine that it's helpful for them to be able to say, you know what, I really don't like when you do that. Can you please stop? Is that something that you would do? And I assume with older children, rather.
Yeah. So that boundaries are so important, and especially if we've been in a relationship where boundaries have been continuously violated by the parent, and then we can start to see it play out with our child, and desperately don't want that to happen, and we desperately don't want them to have the same, I guess, boundary issues as we do. We want them to grow up and have a really strong sense of self and know where their boundaries are. But that can feel hard when you can see it, kind of their boundaries being relentlessly crashed in on.
Yeah.
There are a number of different ways you can talk to children about boundaries, and it kind of depends on their age. But again, it's leaning in with curiosity, helping them to connect the dots, rather than, you can say, okay, that's absolutely not okay, if there's something that's just, they very much need to know and they need to hear that. But them understanding themselves. Okay, who am I? What do I believe? And from there, you can set boundaries around that. Whereas if you don't know who you are and you don't even know what you believe, and you've got all this stuff coming from one parent and you've got stuff coming from another parent, it's very hard to set boundaries within that.
Yeah. It's a difficult balance because you don't want to be bad mouthing the other parent, but you also want to make sure that you're equipping your child to, to deal with these kind of situations going forward. And so it's not always that simple. And I've seen a lot of people where they actually end up making excuses for the parents' bad behavior, which I would assume is not ideal either, to be justifying, ill behavior from the other parent. How would you address that?
Yeah, absolutely not. And we don't want our children to grow up to be chronic people pleasers that love to make excuses for other people's behavior. And that's kind of going to set them up for relationships where their boundaries will be crashed in on. Yeah. And I think an exercise I like to do with probably kids maybe age 7+, it works well with, is actually mapping out the different people in their life. So this is me, and maybe there's a little stick man there, and this is mom, and this is dad. And sometimes I feel like dad says this. Okay, well, what's this coming from? Sometimes I feel like mom saying this. Okay, well, what's that coming from? And what do you think? What do you think in it? Let's bring it back to what you think. How does it make you feel? And why do you think they might be saying that? So it's not justifying it, but actually it's saying, I think they're saying this because of this. Doesn't make it okay. But I see that actually it's not a me problem, it's a them problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a really good way of teaching them to also make up, their own opinions, and not to just repeat what the other person is saying or feel that because it's been said, it's a universal truth, but allow them to challenge whether they feel it's the right thing. Mm-hmm. And it's better than actually challenging it yourself, right? Because then they come to their own conclusion.
Yeah. And helping our child to come to a really healthy conclusion that's based on them rather than based on what we think or based on what the other parent thinks.
And what about, it's a very common scenario, but what about when one of the parents is using the children as messengers? So tell your mother or tell your dad this or that, or how would you deal with that in trying to get the child out of that situation?
So you can assert your boundary and your need and your child's need to your co-parent. If that is dismissed, then again it comes back to holding our child in that messenger position. So they come back and they say, oh, my other parent says you forgot my PE kit and you need to remember it, or something like that, so please make sure you do. Just repeating back to them, okay, they feel like, so I've got the message now. You can rest now. You know that I've got the message, so you don't feel like you need to make sure that I've got it. Because actually, if we say, oh, they shouldn't be telling you that, they don't know whether we've got that message, and they've been given this duty to give this message. So actually, relieve our child from the anxiety of giving the message to begin with. Okay, yeah, I hear that. Thank you. How do you feel when you have to send messages to me? Or how do you feel when you have to say it to me? How do you feel when you're asked to say it to me? Do you want to? And just exploring. The best thing we can do is help our children to understand that dynamic, help them to understand that feeling they probably have in their stomach telling them like, oh, it's not right, helping them understand that rather than them just having to push it down and not understand it.
Yeah, and I love that idea of kind of unburdening them of that responsibility and letting them rest and being, okay, thank you, you've done your job, but actually, did it make you uncomfortable? And is it something that you would like to avoid? And then help them think about a solution to avoid being in that situation again.
Yeah, and stating to them, this isn't your job. This isn't your duty. And I'm sorry that you're being asked to do this. If you ever come to me with a message, I will hear it and I will make sure that I've understood it. But I also want you to know that this isn't your job to do that.
Yeah, that's important to point out. So what would be, as a summary, your 3 tips to a parent who finds themselves in a situation where they're really trying to parent their child in the best possible way through a difficult period, but the other parent is just not really collaborating and sometimes making things worse. If you had to boil it down to 3 tips, what would those be?
Oh, okay. I think definitely just try and focus on what is in your control. Your so much of your mental and emotional energy will be drained if you're not focusing on how you can control your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. That's literally the only things you can control. And based on that, reminding yourself of the research. So when you're having a wobble and you think, oh, I'm not doing enough and this can't possibly be right because I need to tell them, the other parent, that this isn't okay. I need to, because I just have to relentlessly try to make this situation better. Remind yourself of the research. My child needs one key secure attachment figure.
Yeah.
Be okay. How can I take that energy that I'm desperately throwing out there to make my co-parent be the person my child needs them to be, and invest it in me being the most secure base possible for them? Because that is ultimately the key for your child thriving. And I guess thirdly, doing the work for you to become the most secure base. So whether that's working with a coach, whether that's working with a therapist, whatever it is, doing the work so you can untangle yourself from this relational dynamic that you're in. Because just because the marriage ends doesn't mean the relational dynamic ends. So you're still stuck in this old cycle. And actually, how do I show my child what healthy relationship is? Through my relationship with them, but also through my relationship with their co-parent. And how do I show them that they can focus on the things that they're in control of? Because children, they do what we do. They don't do what we say. So ultimately, we have to be the role model of everything we want for our children, which is a pretty tough job. So getting some support for it is pretty crucial.
I agree. And the second point you made really resonates with me. I often remind myself of those statistics because, of course, you can't always be perfect. But knowing that, you are trying your best, and that hopefully more than 30% of the time, I am being the best mother I can. But it's really helpful to know that the bar isn't quite that high, that it's unachievable, and that you don't have to be perfect all the time. So I think that is very much a burden for single parents.
Totally, yeah. They're just relentless pressure, and then they're going to bed with that guilt in your tummy and thinking, oh, I should have said this in this way, and what if they want to talk about that, and what about this, and okay, I'm going to get up tomorrow, I'm going to do it better. But when you get up the next day, you haven't slept that much because you've been anxious, and then you're busy trying to make the packed lunches, and then you're doing the school run, and then you go to work, and then you pick them up, and then the same thing plays out again, and you're like, oh God.
But Hannah, can you just, as a conclusion, just tell us where people can reach you and what kind of services you offer?
Yeah, sure. So you can come reach me over on Instagram. It's Hannah_strong_therapist. But follow the link in the show notes. You'll get a free masterclass that I collaborated with Chloe on. And it's basically going to walk you through everything you need to know to ensure your child doesn't just survive through this, but thrives through it, because it's so possible for them to thrive, even in really difficult co-parenting dynamics, if you know how. So equipping yourself with that knowledge is the key thing. So follow that link, and I look forward to connecting with anyone who is in that space.
Thank you so much, Hannah.